Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. So here's another update version of Through the Gates to Save the Hunt, and today we're going to talk just a little bit about, because we keep hearing about it regularly, about H.R. 845, which Representative Boebert, Congresswoman Boebert, has recently introduced, along with, I think, 31 other congressmen and women federally, and it's an attempt, it's called the Pet and Livestock Protection Act, and it's to require the Secretary of the Interior to reissue regulations removing the gray wolf from the list of endangered and threatened wildlife under the Endangered Species Act of 1973. I've also got Luke Weedle, one of the board members and a good friend of mine. Luke, with your interactions that you've had over the course of last multiple years, almost a decade with RMEF, you've seen them engage in a variety of different things for the management of not just elk, but all wildlife species. And when it comes into making decisions on what to support or what to oppose, that's pretty much done at a federal level first, and then see what it's going to do for ramifications or repercussions on the state level as well, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. RMEF has a particular interest in what happens both at the federal and the state level, and we've seen that narrow down into the state level, I think, increasingly over the last decade or so because of all the attacks that are happening with wildlife management, the politicization of that, et cetera, on a state level as well.
It's been introduced. It's gone through some different things. You see it there. It's January 31st, and where it says Congresswoman Lauren Boebert and Congressman Tom Tiffany of Wisconsin today introduced the Pet and Livestock Protection Act to delist the gray wolf from the endangered species list and prioritize the safety and success of America's agriculture community. The bill, which includes 30 other members of Congress as sponsors, will remove the ability of progressive judges to get in the way of science and allow states to set their own rules and regulations for managing their gray wolf population. The reason we're talking about that today is because there's been assumptions with us reintroducing wolves here through the ballot initiative 114, Proposition 114 in 2020, and that how this would actually affect or not affect Colorado's ability to manage wolves in any different manner than what we've actually done so far. Now, for those people that don't know, we introduced wolves in December of 2023, and most recently, Colorado Parks and Wildlife put another 20 wolves on the ground on top of the 5 that they had from the Copper Creek pack, which they caught and then put into captivity so they could reintroduce them because they were creating damage. You're looking at me funny here.
Well, I'm no expert on the law, but does anybody even know where they were held or if it's legal for?
There's been a lot of assumptions about that, and I'm gonna defer to hopefully that Colorado Parks and Wildlife was following state and federal regulations to the best of their possible ability, but also realizing the fact that there was a lot of things that were coming from much higher up, probably real close to the top of the Golden Dome at the Capitol, that would maybe kind of trickle down into what Colorado Parks and Wildlife's best interests were, not only for the wolves and the people and the landowners and the ranchers that were being affected by that, but also to the other wildlife and to be in consideration as well.
Yeah, I'll say something before we get into this, and that's that I think it was in 2016, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. This was all kind of voter prompted, voter forced wolf reintroduction in the state. The commission passed a resolution stating that they would not actively pursue, I'm paraphrasing off of memory, not actively pursue the introduction of the gray wolf into the state, but would accommodate management as wolves migrated, particularly from Wyoming or any other state they might migrate from.
Exactly. And
it seemed to me that now that we see wolves and so much conflict in the news and on the landscape, it seems to me that was kind of like this prophetic resolution in that, look, there's a reason we're not doing this. And it's because there's so many potential conflicts in a state with 6 million people. There's such a complex system here that we cannot sustain the amount of energy and resources that wolf management would take, by forcing an introduction. And so fast forward to 2020 and you have introduction, and we have, like, we just introduced another 20 gray wolves, and you can see the conflicts that have happened and are happening. You can see the kind of the bandwidth that's been sucked, the amount of focus that's required of the agency just on one species.
Oh, it's
now.
giant.
And so you can see why these decisions should be left to wildlife experts. Anyway, sorry.
No, I mean, it's good because in people have asked us, why didn't you guys get involved in the wolf issue before? Well, with all due respect, we were still fighting bobcats and mountain lions and fur bearers back in 2020, right. And then in 21 and 22. And while I sat on the stakeholder advisory group for the wolf introduction management plan, and it was appointed under Director Prinslow's tenure, I saw firsthand about what my opinion was the manipulation and underminingness of this entire process, all of which went right before back to the commission to implement the wolf management plan that in turn, in a lot of people's opinions, Colorado Parks and Wildlife did not adhere to when it came to depredating type wolf activity up in the Copper Creek back, up around from essentially from Walden down to Kremling and the Grand Lake area. The reason we're talking about it now is because it's gotten attention on a national level, and now that you've got President Trump in there's a lot of people that think that maybe something could be done, and the livestock industry is doing a lot to try to figure out the best way to survive, and we've already talked about it on this episode, this podcast here, about this attempt to alter the ballot initiative language, and you and I spoke with those individuals previously at one of the CWCP meetings, but their grandiose ideas are to not necessarily repeal, and we made sure that they understood it's not a repeal of 114, but there's so many moving parts to this conversation right now. Their attempt would be to alter the language, only the language, and when the wolf introduction would actually have to stop. It specifically says in Proposition 114 that wolf introduction would have had to start by December 31st of 2023, which Colorado Parks and Wildlife complied with. But there was no end date. And while I sat on the stakeholder advisory group, there was a lot of things from the technical working group that would have said, oh, you have to have thresholds of 50 wolves and 100 wolves and 150 wolves. And we get to a point of where are we going to stop and what are we going to do in the process? This particular ballot initiative, if they're so inclined to go through the legal process, through the Title Board, Secretary of State, and I won't rehash what we already talked about a couple weeks ago, is that it'll stop wolf introduction by December 31st or on December 31st of 2026. The component of what Congresswoman Boebert has done is bring something that now you've got a federal side of things, but it won't change what happens here in Colorado as far as delisting at the federal level does not change the state's classification, nor does it change the state management plan. But if future Colorado legislatures or commissions choose to change them from federal government, the federal government would not overrule them. The fact of the matter is that wolves have recovered in the United States and they are no longer in danger of extinction. So they rightfully should be returned to the state management just the way states manage all of their other game and non-game wildlife populations. I've got talking points here that we'll get into, and keep in mind, this is just an update we're just trying to bring people's attention to, but between the Colorado Conservation Alliance, who has taken the task of trying to do litigation on this effort, between these individuals that we previously spoke about trying to alter the management plan itself and the ballot initiative, so to speak, by spending multiple millions of dollars to try to change the ballot language to where there's a stop date, between what Colorado Parks and Wildlife is having to do on a regular daily basis right now, that if I was anyone in charge at CPW, I would have to think about, do I really want to go into work today, or do I need to use some of my sick and vacation time over and over until I got to figure out something else to do for a living? This is not fun for them. forcing wildlife management through the ballot, through ballot box biology that all of us gripe about, forcing it through that to an agency that doesn't have the power to make the right decisions, which we've seen for the last 4+ years, doesn't have the ability to make the right decisions because of gubernatorial oversight, agendas driven by animal extremist organizations that are highly influential into this particular Colorado administration, and then having the agency, the management agency itself, turn around and go, like a shell game. What do I do today to make it better for tomorrow? But this happened. Now I got to change this. What are we supposed to do long term? How is this going to play out? You've seen this from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation standpoint as well. But they had to do it in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming and other states, not by a ballot initiative. So this is uncharted territory for a state that's got the world's largest elk population.
Yeah, well, it's because one particular kind of this so-called mandate from the voter, I mean, it was approved by the voters, so it was injected into the management system, into the agency. And so what you have is something that doesn't properly belong in this complex macro level of wildlife management, and you see it playing out. It seems to me to be very, very bad because, I mean, how much time do you think that the agency, like at all levels, deals with one species of wildlife now, wolf management, and everything that comes with it? Watch a commission meeting and you will see that is a microcosm of what is happening. I mean, is my guess at the agency from top to bottom. And so, I mean, it seems to me that at the commission level, this is taking up more than 50% of the energy on one species. Yeah. And that's why it was mentioned
they don't
before.
Have funding on.
Yeah, that's a whole nother. We could have a whole podcast just on the funding, and so, that's why I was mentioning before that this resolution the commission did way pre 2020, pre voter led mandate, that was somewhat prophetic because you can see what happens when wildlife decisions are made by people who don't know what they're voting on, what they're actually doing.
Let alone when you get commissions that have an ideology or a perspective that's not factually based, and then when they get to a chance to listen to the facts driven by the science between the managing agency, there's a lot of personal perspectives that come in that don't have anything to do with the science in there.
Yeah, and so I guess, I mean, the end result is sort of what seems to me to be a sad one, which is, because again, we're not anti-wolf. We're anti-wolf management. We're anti-wildlife management. And this is what you see this playing out.
We're anti-wildlife management.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. We're not anti-wildlife management.
We're not anti-wildlife management.
Yeah, we're anti-wolf.
Wolf.
Whatever.
You get it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying.
We want to make sure that everything is managed appropriately, but understanding too that one piece of the puzzle, and I say this often, we say it many, many times, you take one piece out and you don't have a complete puzzle.
And what suffers? Everything else. I mean, all the 960 other species of wildlife, and oftentimes hunters are criticized for only caring about game species. But that's not the case. But we have 961 species of wildlife. We have 78 game species, and so you see this example here. What's suffering? Everything else. All the other wildlife, all the other harmony that exists. That doesn't happen by accident. That's intentional. That's complex. Everything else seems to be suffering at the cost of what the wolf introduction as a whole, So anyway, I don't know.
I think too. I mean, people think because of the victories of what we had with CRWM and 127, Proposition 127, the Bobcat and the Mountain Lion deal, that you can automatically flip the script and that you can just change the world upside down, and everybody's biting at the bit because they saw success and they saw victory and they see the vulnerability from the opposition. I don't think there's any vulnerability when it comes to the wolf side of it because the people have already voted on it, and you've got wolves on the ground, and now the managing agency is just trying to figure out what the hell you're trying to do and how you're going to do it. I'm pretty solid in where we're at and what we're doing. I'm just not so sure that the agency has the ability to be able to continue to do that in a manner that's necessary for them to be able to do it.
It doesn't seem like it.
If you want to support a company that supported the efforts to defeat Proposition 127, then you need to support Davis Tent. Davis Tent has provided quality canvas goods for outdoorsmen for the last 50 plus years. For more information, go to davistent.com. If you want to support another business that was instrumental in helping us defeat Proposition 127, check out Salida Gun Shop. Salida Gun Shop in Salida, Colorado provides quality products, expertise, and knowledge from individuals that actually do what they sell. Go to salidagunshop.com. Listen to the advice of Cameron Haynes and support companies that are supporting your cause and your efforts. Minturn Anglers is one of those companies. Minturn Anglers provides product and fishing excursions in Colorado and are second to none. For more information, go to minturnanglers.com. The things that we've had to deal with and how some of this stuff has played out, some of it's perception of the general public. We just need to stop it. Well, it's not as easy as what it might sound. We spent over $2.8 million of our own money that we raised and that was contributed and donated to CRWM and the Colorado Wildlife Deserve Better campaign. Plus, there was a variety of other funding components that came together at different levels. In totality, probably somewhere around $4.1 or $4.2 million on this that you just get to a level and you go, how much money do you need to spend on fighting for stuff when you should be able to turn around and put it towards stuff? And so this particular issue where it'll say that they're going to delist. Everybody will talk about delisting. So if they go this route, does the ballot initiative really stand for them to turn around and change the language, that an end date? Because the end date is there, but it doesn't solve any of the issues between now and the end date, and it doesn't do anything with wolves after the end date. Plus, you'd spend several $1 million to be able to accomplish that.
Just for clarification, too, you're talking about this new proposed ballot initiative, not 114.
Not 114. They can't. We agreed that they can't repeal that.
Right. And so what this ballot initiative seeks to do is to put an end date
for December 31st, 2026.
Bookend the reintroduction.
Yeah. So if you have that, and then you got the federal side of this, and you've got all these other components, you can't make it all work. From RMEF standpoint, and I've got a few statements here that we can go over, but from RMEF standpoint, what value is there to turn around and do any of this when it comes to Colorado at this point in time? Because it's still going to be under state management.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what RMEF is supportive of, is state management and getting the kind of getting wolf management as a whole nationally away from this activist process. Because, look, I mean, as far as RMEF is concerned, wolves have been recovered. They've been delisted twice, and then because of activist judges, that whole thing falls apart. And so really what we're after is state management. I don't know what it is trying to solve, or what. I think there could be potentially unintended consequences here that we got to be careful to really look for as we go down that road.
Yeah, and you got to deal with the commission. Then you have the legislature. These are things that aren't even considered in the two options that I've given with the ballot initiative and the federal legislation. But considerations for Colorado, for a Colorado sportsman, removing gray wolves from the federal Endangered Species Act will eventually get the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of the decision-making process for wolf management in the state, which empowers CPW and theoretically gives the state flexibility in the future to manage wolves and allow take as part of that management plan. What flexibility Colorado has now is the result of the 10J non-essential experimental population that has been granted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. However, 10J rules can be overturned by federal courts, so future flexibility is out of the state's control as long as the wolves are on the endangered species list. The second bullet point of that is forest and other habitat management projects on federal lands, such as BLM and Forest Service, are required to go through consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service over endangered species, and that consultation can slow down projects and in some cases alter or stop management activities. The lack of forest management is the main cause of decline in habitat for deer and elk on federal lands, which contributes to both smaller herds, but also herds spending less time on public land in favor of better habitat on private lands. Removing wolves from the Endangered Species Act will help keep them from being used as an excuse to slow down or stop forest projects in federal courts. And then the final bullet point that people should pay attention to is delisting wolves in the lower 48 will mean more domestic wolf populations that CPW can draw from. The Endangered Species Act status prohibits take and capturing wolves to relocate to another state that is considered take. States where wolves are delisted, such as Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, have been unwilling to share wolves with Colorado for a variety of reasons, and the Great Lakes states have high wolf populations but are currently classified endangered as well, such as Wisconsin and Michigan, or threatened in Minnesota. Should delisting occur, these states would no longer have federal prohibitions on capturing and moving wolves. The interesting thing about that is we had to get wolves, well, CPW, I didn't do it, but CPW had to get wolves from British Columbia because no states would give them to them. If the ESA was enacted and the wolves were delisted, it looks like that those wolves could actually be sought after out of other locations. And I think that the biggest thing that we have to realize is there's so many moving parts in between the election season of 2026 and this particular piece of federal legislation that is likely to happen one way or the other during this General Assembly and the federal side. Plus, you got the commission working at a rapid pace to turn around and whatever the hell they need to do or what they can do. Plus, the Colorado Conservation Alliance doing the litigation side, talking about NEPA and talking about the ESA and the EIS. There's a lot of moving parts to this that have not still been solved, that have a lot of correlation to what people are having to live with and what is happening for wolf management and other wildlife management on the landscape. In short, from what you know and what you've seen, what would you say that we're going to have to deal with over the course of the next 6 months when it comes to any of these conversations?
I think there's going to be a lot of people running around thinking they have the answers to everything. And that they think we should go in one direction or another, but like you just pointed out, I mean, that's so much to get your head around, and it's complex, and it's becoming increasingly more complex now with this proposed federal legislation, and potentially donor populations of wolves opening up from states like the Great Lakes states. I mean, Washington or Michigan. Wisconsin and Minnesota in particular have, I think, probably the highest wolf populations in the country. And so that could be interesting. I think that there's a lot that's going to happen in between now and November of 2026 going on 2027. And we have to be careful not to trip over our own selves.
I think one of the other things too, Luke, is this is not the only subject matter that we have to deal with. We've got commission issues. We've got legislative issues. We've got mountain lion and bobcat issues. We've got hounding and fair chase and trophy hunting conversations at different levels. We've got all the fur bear stuff, beaver management plans. But one thing is for sure, that it's our job as sportsmen and women to make sure that we do things as holistically and organically as what we possibly can, with working with all the other partner organizations and making sure that we stay steadfast and resolved to do what is within our power, and then just to educate the general public and get our partners on board to make sure that they give the message out there as well.
No doubt.
So that's the update for this week. We'll get in some other conversations over the course of the next several weeks. And for now, thanks for tuning in to Through the Gates to Save the Hunt.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.